And you are also the author of Raw Deal, which, when is it coming out?
December 6th.
Okay, tell us about it.
This book was inspired by 9 years of reporting at Forbes, talking to billionaires, hearing them talking about how much they're making off the meat industry at the same time as when I was reporting on meat packers being closed in the pandemic, and just seeing climate change evolve and really impact our food system. So I really needed to get this message out there and share with the world how hidden corruption and corporate greed has been impacting meat.
So the book starts with the pandemic. Why is that such an inflection point in the meat industry?
It was a really catalyzing moment for a lot of consumers of meat who had never really thought too much deeper about where their food and where their meat comes from and all the different ways in which it is made, and which can be very harmful for the environment but also for the workers and the community surrounding production. And so I think when people all of a sudden were seeing meat flying off the shelves, meat, cases being empty, it was shocking. And there could be more to come. And I think there are other crises that we will be continuing to face with climate change. And so I think both of these factors were wild for people to really understand.
Yeah, it was definitely a really tumultuous time in the country for a multitude of reasons. And you write that in your book, you write that John Tyson actually took out a New York Times ad where he claimed the quote, "food supply chain is breaking." And you report that, quote, "the ad was published within 7 months of the 2020 presidential election. Americans historically haven't kept politicians in office when they're unhappy with meat." Why?
America's economy has been shaped by the meat industry for generations, and as diets have followed along suit with that. And so, John Tyson, when he took out that ad, he was seeing plants shutting down, workers not showing up, workers getting sick, and he wanted to make sure the lights in his plants were staying on so he could continue to make more meat, continue to export it across the world, and also continue to have his workers staying on the line. And so there was a lot of different things to unpack when he placed that ad and started trying to kind of rally support around keeping meat packers open. It got super, super, super politicized in the sense that, there's been a lot of audits and different, investigations into how this really happened and how there were nearly 300 deaths and nearly 60,000 workers getting sick from this pandemic, from staying in the plants and continuing to work. And so, you have a lot of power, a lot of interest in keeping business going, a lot of people who still need food, of course, across the country, and it was an essential service. But at the same time, then in Tyson plants, you also have white-collar managers placing bets, this horrific betting pool on workers and saying how many of them would die. That eventually led to the firings of 7 different plant workers at one plant in Iowa. That's just one example. There was a concerted effort from meat packers like this CEO of Tyson, but also Smithfield and a lot of other lobbyists for the meat industry to have a say in how the regulations and how the government was interacting with them and how they could keep plants open, how they were interacting with workers. And so we see this all coming to light with this ad and the stress and the tension placed on the food system because of it.
Of course. And 2020 wasn't the first time that you saw this sort of intersection of meat and politics in the United States. Can you give us a brief history lesson here of how this has happened kind of throughout American history?
Absolutely. I mean, there's countless stories. And I mean, the original Packers and Stockyards Act was even, put in place because there was so much consolidation in meat and so much meat prices rising and consumers getting so mad about it. And so there's different points throughout history where meat was boycotted or consumers were demanding lower prices or demanding the meat industry change, and having a kind of stronger say in actually the fluctuations in price and how things were going. But as meat packers took on more control, that all got a little different. But in 1947, for example, the Democratic Party had a 16-year control of Congress, and the meat prices got so bad and people got so upset about them, the boycotts got so vitriolic that they lost the House. And it was the first time a Republican had been in essentially since for nearly almost 2 decades.
Wow, and is this problem unique to, or this relationship between meat and politics, is it unique to the United States, or does this happen all over the world?
Meat is such a key source of nutrients and source of food around the world, so it's been a part of policy since, as old as time in some ways. But in the U.S., there is a specific culture around us needing meat, us needing more meat, and us demanding it from this industry. And that has really drove the industry to feed the world and deliver meat around the world.